A good job used to mean something. Not just a paycheck, not just benefits, not just a title. It meant you could build a life. You could leave your parents' house, rent without panic, maybe buy a home, maybe start a family, maybe feel like adulthood actually had a structure. That was the deeper promise. Not luxury, not guaranteed wealth, just a stable path. A good job was supposed to make ordinary adult life possible. But now something feels broken, because millions of people have what should be considered good jobs, and still cannot buy the thing those jobs were supposed to make possible. Not because they are reckless, not because they never tried, not because they ignored the rules, but because the relationship between work and housing changed. And once that link breaks, the meaning of a good job starts to collapse. So if a good job can't buy a home anymore, what exactly is it for? Because if work no longer opens the door to stability, then the system is not just under-delivering. It is quietly withdrawing one of the central promises that made work feel worth organizing life around in the first place. When people talk about wanting a good job, they are rarely talking only about prestige. They are talking about conversion. Can this job convert effort into stability? Can it convert discipline into independence? Can it convert time into a life that feels structurally possible? That is what made a good job different from just any job. It did not merely keep you afloat week to week. It gave you traction. It allowed you to plan, to commit, to move out, to build a household, to believe the future might become more stable instead of more fragile. Housing sat at the center of that promise, because home ownership was never just a purchase. It was proof. Proof that work could produce permanence. Proof that adulthood had a ladder. Proof that your labor connected to something solid enough to build on. That mattered deeply, because once people can no longer anchor their lives physically, everything else starts to feel more temporary too. The good job loses part of its moral meaning. It starts to look less like a path forward and more like an expensive form of survival. One reason this issue cuts so deeply is that housing is not just another expense. It is the structure around which adult life gets organized. Where you live affects your relationships, your commute, your children, your stress, your sense of privacy, your long-term decisions, your ability to rest, your willingness to stay in one place, your emotional feeling of being established in the world. That is why a home has always carried such symbolic power. It is shelter, yes, but it is also membership in stable adulthood. It signals that work has translated into something durable. So when people with respectable jobs cannot buy homes, the issue is not merely financial. It is existential. Because they are not only losing a purchase, they are losing a milestone that once told people, you are doing okay, you are building something, you are entering a stable life. If that milestone keeps moving further away, then the meaning of professional success starts to weaken. A job can look respectable on paper and still fail to produce the kind of life it was culturally designed to justify. That is a very dangerous mismatch. At the center of this problem is a simple but devastating break. The price of housing and the earnings from labor stopped moving together. For long stretches of time, even imperfectly, a good income could still plausibly connect to a home. Not instantly, not effortlessly, but credibly. People believed the path existed: save, work consistently, advance a little, buy something modest, build from there. That path has weakened dramatically for many workers, because wages rose too slowly, housing prices rose too fast, urban concentration intensified, asset ownership gained power, and homes increasingly became not just places to live, but vehicles for wealth, investment, scarcity, and financial strategy. That changed the entire equation. Labor income remained bounded by salaries, negotiations, and employer power. Housing became shaped more by capital flows, low supply, investor logic, zoning constraints, speculation, and accumulated asset advantage. So workers were still trying to buy homes with wages, while homes were increasingly behaving like financial assets. That is a battle labor usually loses. And once that happens, even a job that feels objectively good can become insufficient relative to the market it is trying to enter. Not because the worker failed, but because the benchmark moved into a different economic universe. This is where the cultural tension becomes obvious. A lot of jobs still carry the social language of success. Professional titles, salaries that sound serious, office jobs with degrees behind them, careers that parents would call respectable. But the material power behind those jobs has eroded. That is what many people are feeling. The job still sounds good. It still looks good. It still demands education, discipline, presentation, emotional control, and long hours. But it no longer buys what it once symbolized. So a strange split appears. The worker has the identity of stability without the reality of it. That creates quiet humiliation. Because society still treats certain jobs as proof that you should be doing fine. And if you are not doing fine, if you are renting forever, delaying children, sharing space longer than planned, or feeling locked out of ownership, the failure starts to feel personal. But often, it is structural. The job is not fake. Its social promise is, or at least part of it is. That is why so many professionally respectable people feel economically disoriented. They achieved the category that was supposed to open the door. And the door still did not open. A society can survive when luxuries become harder to reach. It becomes much harder to hold together when stable adulthood becomes harder to reach. Because home ownership is tied to more than aspiration, it is tied to timing. When people cannot afford stable housing, they delay life. They delay family formation, delay geographic commitment, delay long-term belonging, delay risk-taking, delay rest, delay the feeling that they have arrived anywhere solid. This changes culture more than people admit. Adulthood becomes stretched out, uncertain, provisional. People remain economically capable enough to keep functioning, but not secure enough to feel established. And that creates a strange emotional atmosphere. You are not failing dramatically. You are functioning permanently without landing. That is exhausting. It also makes work feel different. Because if years of discipline still do not produce stable ground, then work stops feeling like a ladder and starts feeling like maintenance under pressure. You are not climbing into life. You are renting access to it month by month. That is not just a housing problem. It is a civilizational problem. The cruelest part of this shift is how easily people blame themselves for it. If I got the degree, got the job, worked hard, stayed responsible, and still cannot buy a home, then what does that say about me? This is where a structural failure becomes psychological, because the old promise still exists in people's minds. A good job equals progress. Progress equals stability. Stability eventually includes a home. When reality no longer matches that sequence, people often assume they personally mismanaged something. Maybe I should have chosen a different field. Maybe I should have worked more. Maybe I waited too long. Maybe everyone else figured something out. But sometimes the deeper truth is simpler and harsher. The bargain changed. The job category still exists. The life outcome attached to it weakened. And because society has not fully updated its language, workers are left trying to perform success inside systems that no longer reward it in the same way. That creates shame where there should be analysis, and confusion where there should be structural clarity. The lesson here is not that everyone must own a home to have dignity. That would be too narrow. The real lesson is that a good job was always supposed to do more than provide income. It was supposed to make stable adult life materially possible. Housing became the clearest symbol of that. Not because it was the only thing that mattered, but because it concentrated the entire promise in one concrete question. If I do what society asked, can I build something durable? For more and more people, the answer feels uncertain. That uncertainty changes how work itself is perceived. A good job without purchasing power begins to feel like prestige without consequence, responsibility without conversion, discipline without reward. And once enough people experience that, trust in the labor system weakens. Not because people suddenly became entitled, but because one of the clearest markers of progress stopped arriving for workers who did, in fact, follow the script. So the real problem is not simply that homes got expensive. It is that modern work kept demanding adult seriousness while increasingly failing to fund adult stability. That contradiction is bigger than real estate. It goes to the heart of what work is supposed to be for. Maybe that is the question underneath all of this. Not just why homes became so expensive, but why good jobs became so weak relative to the life they once promised. Because once a society reaches the point where even respectable, disciplined, full-time workers cannot reliably buy stability, something foundational has shifted. The title still exists, the effort still exists, the income still exists, but the conversion is breaking. So if a good job can't buy a home anymore, what is it for? To survive, to signal status, to keep functioning, to delay panic? A good job used to mean more than that. And if it no longer opens the door to a durable life, then people are not wrong to feel that something central has been taken from them. Not loudly, not officially, but structurally.